Fear and anxiety often feel overwhelming, but the Stoics teach us that much of this turmoil comes from our perception, not the external reality. How often have you dreaded something, only to find out later that it wasn't as bad as you imagined? We all experience fear and worry, that pounding heart before a big presentation, the anxious nights stressing over what-ifs. The surprising truth known to Stoic philosophers over 2,000 years ago is that these emotions are largely shaped by our own judgments. In other words, it's not the event itself, but how we think about the event that makes us afraid. In today's fast-paced and uncertain world, mastering our fears and anxieties is more crucial than ever. Turn on the news or scroll through your phone, and it seems like there's always something new to worry about. Global events, personal challenges, the pressure to succeed. If we don't learn how to handle these feelings, they can easily take over our lives. But imagine if you could transform that fear into fuel for growth instead. Imagine viewing anxiety not as a monster chasing you, but as a messenger telling you where to focus and grow. The ancient Stoics believed you can do exactly that. And in this video, we'll explore 14 powerful Stoic strategies for transforming fear into personal growth and strength. These aren't dry, old-timey theories. They are practical techniques you can start using right now. We'll go through them one by one in a logical order because each strategy builds on the previous one. By applying each in sequence, their benefits will compound, helping you not only conquer fear and anxiety, but actually use those feelings to become stronger and wiser. So if you've ever felt held back by fear, whether it's fear of failure, fear of others' opinions, or just a general anxiety about life, stay with me. By the end of this video, you'll have a Stoic toolkit to not just face those fears, but to transform them into opportunities for growth. Let's dive into the first strategy, which lays the foundation for everything to come. 1. Understanding fear and anxiety. To overcome fear, we first need to understand what it really is. The Stoics viewed fear and anxiety not as terrifying monsters to run from, but as messengers or signals. Think about it. When you feel anxious before a big event, like speaking in public, what's actually happening? Your mind is sending signals about something you value, maybe your reputation or success, that you think is under threat. But, and here's the Stoic insight, that threat often exists more in our imagination than in reality. As Marcus Aurelius observed, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. In other words, it's our opinion of an event, our estimate that it's scary or dangerous, that upsets us more than the event itself. Take the common example of public speaking. Surveys often show it's one of people's greatest fears. Some say they fear it even more than death. But why? If you stand up in front of others to speak, the reality is that you're not in physical danger. You're not being attacked by a wild animal or anything. Yet your perception might be that this is life or death. If I mess up, it's going to be awful. That perception triggers adrenaline and panic. Your heart races, palms sweat, thoughts spiral. What if I forget my words? What if they all laugh at me? This is horrible. The Stoics would gently remind us, all those catastrophic thoughts are coming from within your mind. The audience simply sitting there isn't literally harming you. As Epictetus famously said, it's not things that upset us, but our judgments about things. In our public speaking example, the event, speaking to a crowd, is not inherently dangerous. It's our judgment that this is scary and will end badly that causes the distress. So, what exactly are fear and anxiety in Stoic terms? The Stoics broke it down like this. Fear usually arises from the imagined loss of something we value, and anxiety is the ongoing anticipation that we might lose it. Both emotions feed on uncertainty about the future. For instance, if you deeply value others' respect, you might fear losing face or being embarrassed, imagined loss of status. Then you feel anxiety as you anticipate a situation where that could happen, like the upcoming speech. The key is that in both cases, nothing has actually happened yet. Your mind is living in a painful fiction, a future that you are inventing right now. As Marcus Aurelius noted, we often suffer more in imagination than in reality, a point we'll revisit later. Fear and anxiety thrive in that realm of what if and worst-case scenarios that we play on repeat in our heads. The Stoics, even 2,000 years ago, understood that our brain's alarms are often out of sync with reality. They saw fear and anxiety as natural human emotions, not moral failings. But they also taught that these emotions can be managed and even used for good once we recognize their true source. Instead of viewing fear as an enemy, we can see it as a teacher. Fear points out what matters to us. You don't fear losing what you don't care about. So fear is like a signpost saying, here lies something valuable. Anxiety is like a reminder. This matters, pay attention. In Stoic philosophy, emotions are not random. They're tied to our beliefs and values. By understanding this, you can start to change your relationship with fear and anxiety. Next time you're afraid or anxious, pause and ask, what is this feeling telling me? Is it warning me of a real immediate danger? Or is it highlighting something I care deeply about? Perhaps something I need to prepare for or adjust my attitude toward? Often you'll find the fear is pointing to a value or attachment, like reputation, health, or security, that you dread losing. That leads us to our next strategy, which is one of the Stoics' most fundamental lessons: learning to separate what we can control from what we cannot. 2. Focus on what you can control. Let go of the rest. One of the core principles of Stoicism is the sharp distinction between what is within our control and what is not. This idea comes mainly from the Stoic teacher Epictetus, who said, some things are up to us and some are not up to us. Understanding this difference is like grabbing a flashlight in a dark cave. It immediately clarifies where to focus your energy and where you're just wasting effort. Fear and anxiety love to multiply when we try to control the uncontrollable. So the Stoics teach, focus your mind on what you can actually influence and release the rest as not up to me. What exactly is in our control? Epictetus explains that we control our own thoughts, beliefs, attitudes, and actions. Basically, our own mind and how we decide to respond. On the other hand, we do not control external events or other people's actions and opinions. Here's a simple way to see it. Within my control, my judgments and opinions, my intentions, my effort, my words and deeds, how I decide to interpret what happens to me. Outside my control, basically everything else. Other people's choices, the weather, the past, the outcome of events once I've done my part, and random circumstances. When we get anxious, it's often because we're mentally wrestling with things we can't control. For example, say you have a job interview tomorrow. You might be tied in knots with anxiety about, what if they don't like me? What if the interviewer's in a bad mood? What if the hiring decision has nothing to do with my performance? Notice all those worries are about outcomes and other people, things not directly in your control. According to Stoicism, this is mental baggage you need to drop. You cannot directly control the interviewer's mood or the final decision. Worrying endlessly about those factors is like carrying an impossible weight on your shoulders. It only drains you. So what is in your control in that situation? Your preparation and your mindset. You can control how thoroughly you prepare for the interview, researching the company, practicing your answers, getting enough rest. You can control your mindset, approaching the opportunity with optimism, determination, and the willingness to learn regardless of the outcome. Epictetus would say, focus only on doing your best in the moment, because that effort and attitude are truly up to you. The rest, whether you get the job or not, is outside your control, so mentally let it go. This doesn't mean you become passive about life. On the contrary, it means putting 100% of your effort into what you can change. which is usually plenty, and 0% into what you can't. It's amazingly freeing. When you really grasp this, fear and anxiety lose much of their bite. You start responding to challenging situations with something like, okay, what part of this can I actually do something about? I'll work on that. The rest I won't torture myself over. It's a straightforward concept, but not always easy in practice. It takes reminders and discipline. The Stoics literally reminded themselves daily of the control versus no control dichotomy. Try this simple practice. The next time you feel anxious, take a piece of paper and draw 2 columns. Label one within my control and the other not in my control. List the specific things about the situation that fall into each category. Be honest and specific. For instance, if you're anxious about an upcoming exam, you can control how much you study, how you manage your time, and keeping a positive attitude. You cannot control what questions will be on the test, or other students' performance, or the grading curve. Seeing it laid out like this can be a huge relief. You realize where to put your energy, studying effectively, and what to mentally release, worrying about the questions or the curve. By focusing on the controllable, you empower yourself. You're no longer a victim of circumstance in your mind. You become an active participant in your own life. And by letting go of the uncontrollable, you lighten an immense psychological burden. It's like dropping a heavy suitcase you've been needlessly carrying. This shift is foundational for many of the techniques that follow. With this mindset, we can move to the next strategy, using fear as a clue to examine our values and priorities. 3. Use fear to realign your values. Have you ever noticed that what you fear reveals what you value? For example, if you fear failure at work, it shows you value success or respect. If you fear losing a relationship, it shows you deeply value that person or the feeling of love. The Stoics were keenly aware of this link. They taught that fear often points to an attachment or value that might be out of balance. In other words, we tend to fear losing things we're overly attached to or place above our other values. Thus, fear can be a useful indicator, a signal to examine what we care about and whether our priorities are in the right order. Seneca, one of the great Roman Stoics, put it bluntly, "He who fears death will never do anything worthy of a living man." What did he mean? Essentially, if your highest value is clinging to life at all costs, if you fear death so much that it drives every decision, you'll avoid any risk, any challenge, and end up accomplishing nothing meaningful. In Seneca's eyes, it's not that life isn't valuable, it is, but that living in constant fear of losing life makes life worse than the death you're avoiding. The fear of death can stop you from truly living, so he urges us to realign, value a worthy life over just living longer. In that realignment, the fear of death loses its grip, because something else, living honorably or usefully, matters more. This principle applies to many fears. If I'm overly afraid of public speaking, maybe I've placed too high a value on approval or comfort, and not enough on the value of sharing ideas or helping others through my speech. If I'm paralyzed by fear of losing money, maybe I value security or status more than things like integrity, generosity, or experiences. Fear shines a spotlight on these attachments. The Stoics would say, use that spotlight to reflect, why does this scare me so much? What am I so afraid to lose? And does it truly matter as much as I think it does? Sometimes we realize that we've been clinging to false values or externals, things like wealth, reputation, or even particular comforts, as if our happiness depended entirely on them. Stoicism encourages us to shift our focus to deeper values that can't be taken away so easily, like our character, virtue, and how we choose to act. Marcus Aurelius wrote a reminder to himself along these lines, noting how each of us can always choose integrity and goodness no matter what happens externally. If fear points out a misalignment, say I fear being honest because I might lose a friend's approval, the Stoic approach would be, recognize that integrity, being honest, is a higher value than popularity. Yes, I might lose that person's approval in the short term, but I keep my integrity and self-respect, which are ultimately more important for a good life. Realizing that helps dissolve the fear. My value system shifts. I'd rather be honest and face possible disapproval than live in fear of always pleasing others. Another example, fear of change often indicates we cling to comfort or the known too tightly. Life is change. Nothing is permanent, and Stoics constantly remind themselves of this fact of nature. If I value personal growth, then enduring a change, even an uncomfortable one, aligns with growth, whereas clinging to comfort at all costs might not. By realigning with the value of growth and resilience, the fear of change can lessen. I start to see change as challenging but potentially good rather than purely threatening. To apply this practically, try this exercise. Next time you feel a specific fear, ask, what value does this fear point to? Then ask, is that value in its proper place, or have I made it too important? For instance, fear of embarrassment might point to valuing social acceptance. Of course, we all enjoy acceptance. That's normal. But is it worth more than truth or personal progress? If I avoid every challenge to never feel embarrassed, I sacrifice growth for comfort. A Stoic might conclude, I value the courage to improve over the temporary comfort of not being judged. That shift immediately weakens the fear of embarrassment. It's powerful to realize you can choose your values and focus. You can decide that some things are more important than fear. That doesn't mean the fear vanishes overnight, but it puts you back in the driver's seat. Rather than fear controlling you, your values start to guide you. If you align those values with virtues like courage, honesty, and purpose, fear finds less and less space to operate. This doesn't happen automatically. It takes reflection and often some courage. But it's a deeply rewarding process, and it leads perfectly into our next point. How changing your perception of events can change your whole experience of them. 4. Change your perspective. Change your experience. Consider this scenario. Two people get stuck in the same traffic jam on the highway. One pounds the steering wheel, cursing and stressed out, convinced the day is ruined. The other person, in a car just a few yards away, takes a deep breath and perhaps turns on some music or a favorite podcast, using the time to relax or think. Same external event, standstill traffic, completely different reactions. What's the difference? It's all about perception and mindset. The Stoics taught that what upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about these things. This profound insight means that the way we frame or interpret a situation will directly shape how we feel about it. Change your perspective and you change your experience. Let's break down the traffic example. The frustrated driver sees the jam as a personal affront or a disaster. This sucks, I'm wasting time. People are idiots, my whole schedule is messed up. Those thoughts create anger and anxiety. The calm driver sees the jam as, well, I can't change the situation, let me make the best of it. Maybe call a friend, hands-free, or just enjoy a rare moment where I'm forced to slow down. Those thoughts create, at worst, acceptance, and at best, maybe even a bit of peace or enjoyment with the music. Neither driver can magically clear the road. The only difference is in the judgment. One judges it as unbearable, the other as tolerable or even a useful pause. The result is two entirely different emotional experiences while sitting in the same line of cars. The Stoics were masters of this art of reframing. They knew we often can't control life's events. Remember part 2, but we can always control how we view those events. Epictetus said, in essence, that every challenge has two handles. We can choose the handle that makes it light and manageable, or the handle that makes it heavy. It's about choosing the interpretation that serves us better. This isn't about being delusional or Pollyanna-ish. It's about recognizing that there's more than one way to see any situation. Why not choose the perspective that reduces fear and suffering and encourages positive action? Another famous Stoic, Marcus Aurelius, constantly reminded himself in his personal journal, which we know as meditations, to examine his impressions of events. In one passage, he essentially says, throw out your judgments and you're left with just the thing itself, which can't disturb you. It's not the thing that troubles us, but our opinion of it. If the thing itself is neutral, a traffic jam is just a traffic jam, a rainy day is just water falling from the sky, then the power to label it good or bad lies with us. And those labels will create our emotional state. How can we apply this to fear and anxiety? When something happens that triggers fear, try to pause and reframe the narrative you're telling yourself. For example, let's say you get critical feedback at work and you feel a wave of anxiety and fear. I'm not good enough, this is terrible. Catch that thought. Now attempt a different perspective. This feedback is actually helpful. It's pointing out how I can improve. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but I can use it to get better at my job. This is an opportunity to learn. Notice the shift from seeing it as a disaster, leading to fear of failure or judgment, to seeing it as useful information, leading to motivation or at least calm determination. The event didn't change. Your mind's approach to it did. The emotional tone follows the interpretation. Another example, you're anxious about a first date. The negative frame might be, what if I make a fool of myself? If it doesn't go well, it's a catastrophe. I'll be alone forever. That will tie your stomach in knots. A Stoic-inspired reframe could be, this is just a chance to meet someone and have a conversation. Even if we don't click, it's not the end of the world. It's a learning experience and maybe even a funny story to tell later. If we do click, great. Either way, I'll be okay. By reframing, you turn a high-stakes life or death scenario in your head into a low-stakes, perhaps even enjoyable outing. The fear calms down because you've removed its fuel, which was the catastrophic interpretation. The Stoics often used analogies to help with perspective. One analogy, life is like a play and we are actors. We don't control the script or the stage design. Fate does. But we can control how we perform our role. If something unexpected happens on stage, a good actor doesn't freeze in terror. They stay in character and make the best of it. This mental image can help you reframe surprises or setbacks, not as terrifying failures, but as moments where you get to improvise and shine with the character you choose to be. In summary, perception shapes experience. When fear strikes, ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this situation? Then challenge that story. Is there another way to view this that is more constructive, or at least less dire? The Stoics aren't saying you must enjoy every problem. They're saying every problem can be viewed in a way that helps you suffer less and cope better. By practicing this mental flexibility, you'll find that many fears and anxieties can be dialed down or even transformed into determination. And speaking of dialing down anxiety, one of the most effective ways to do that is learning to stay grounded in the present moment, which is our next strategy. 5. Stay present. Don't live in the what if. Anxiety has a favorite time zone, the future. When we're anxious, our minds sprint ahead to all the possible things that could go wrong. Or sometimes we jump to the past, ruminating on old mistakes and worrying they'll repeat. The Stoics understood this tendency very well. They knew that a mind flitting to the past and future is a mind prone to worry. Their remedy sounds simple, but is deeply powerful. Bring your attention back to the present moment. As Marcus Aurelius advised himself, confine yourself to the present. By staying present, we reclaim clarity and calm that are lost when our thoughts time travel into uncertainty. Why does the present moment matter so much? Because right now, in this very moment, things are usually okay, or at least manageable. It's the imagined future where our fears live, and the remembered past where regret and shame dwell. When you narrow your focus to what is happening right here, right now, you cut off a huge source of anxiety. You can handle this moment. You can speak the next sentence, take the next step, deal with today's tasks. It's when you start thinking about handling every future task all at once, or fixing every past issue that you get overwhelmed. As another Stoic, Seneca, put it, never let the whole sweep of life crush you. Instead, he said, face things one step at a time. Seneca has a wonderful image. He said life's troubles should be taken like portions of food, small bites rather than trying to swallow a whole feast at once. If you have to undergo a difficult year, don't think of the entire year's worth of challenges in one gulp. Focus on today, or this hour, or this minute. This you can do, then the next, then the next. How am I going to get through the year becomes, what can I do in the next hour? This grounds you and reduces that paralyzing anxiety about the long road ahead. By staying present, you prevent the whole sweep of life from crushing you. Modern mindfulness practices echo this Stoic wisdom. When you feel anxious, try a simple grounding technique. Pause and notice something around you. The colors in the room, the sensation of your breath, the sounds you hear. This pulls you out of the whirlwind of worries and back to reality here and now. The Stoics didn't use the term mindfulness, but they cultivated it. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about focusing only on the present task and not letting his mind drag him into future fantasies or past regrets. He wrote, "Do everything as if it were the last thing you were doing in your life." That wasn't meant in a morbid way, but as a way to fully attend to the now, because now is all we ever truly have. Let's apply this concretely. Suppose you're anxious about an upcoming move to a new city. Your mind is racing. How will I find friends? What if my job doesn't work out? What if I hate it there? So many things could go wrong. None of those questions can be answered in this moment. They're all future uncertainties. The Stoic present focus approach would be, what can I do right now regarding this move? Maybe that's packing one box, or researching one good neighborhood, or simply taking a walk to clear your head. The emphasis is on doing what you can now and not leaping to what will happen months from now. By doing that, you relieve the pressure. When the future arrives, you'll deal with it with the resources you have at that time, which you can't fully predict now. As Marcus said comfortingly, you will meet future troubles with the same reason and strength that you use today for present troubles. Trust that your future self will handle future problems. Your job now is to handle whatever is in front of you at present. Another scenario. You're lying in bed at night and anxiety is keeping you awake, maybe replaying an awkward conversation from earlier, past, or worrying about tomorrow's workload, future. A Stoic stay present tactic could be, focus on your breathing, feel the weight of the blanket, listen to the hum of the fan. Remind yourself, right now I am just lying in bed and nothing is attacking me. The day's done, tomorrow isn't here. I'll get rest now so I can be at my best when tomorrow arrives. Essentially, you shrink your world to the size of this moment. The fears shrink with it because they can't survive in the simplicity of just now. Right now you're safe. Right now you're breathing. That's reality. Stoics also use the present focus to enhance gratitude and appreciation. By being present, you notice little good things you normally overlook. The taste of your food, the presence of a loved one, a moment of quiet. Anxiety often blinds us to these small positives because we're mentally elsewhere. Regaining presence lets us actually live our life instead of being lost in the mental movie of disaster futures or haunting pasts. One more thing. Staying present doesn't mean never planning or reflecting. The Stoics planned for the future. They were often in positions of leadership and learned from the past. But crucially, they did those deliberately, not compulsively. They would say, plan when it's time to plan, reflect when it's time to reflect, but mostly live in the now. If you find yourself constantly drifting into what ifs, gently pull your attention back to whatever you are doing at the moment. It's a practice like training a puppy to come back when called. By confining yourself to the present, you cut off a huge source of fear's power, the unknown future. This gives you clarity and a sense of peace. And from this calmer, present-oriented mindset, you can employ one of Stoicism's most potent exercises for fear, which might sound counterintuitive at first. Negative visualization, intentionally imagining the worst-case scenarios, but in a controlled, stoic way. Let's explore that next. 6. Practice negative visualization. Prepare for the worst to strengthen yourself. One of the most powerful and perhaps surprising tools in the Stoic toolkit is something called negative visualization. Now you might think, wait, I'm already great at visualizing the worst. It's called worrying. But Stoic negative visualization is not the same as anxious worrying. It's a deliberate, controlled exercise where you imagine bad scenarios ahead of time, not to scare yourself, but to rob them of their surprise and power. It's like a vaccine for the mind. You expose yourself to a small mental dose of a possible misfortune under your own terms so that if it ever happens for real, you're more emotionally prepared. Far from being pessimistic, this practice can actually reduce fear and increase gratitude. Seneca explained the idea brilliantly. He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand. If you have already pictured and accepted the possibility of something bad, then if it occurs, it's less likely to knock you off your feet. You won't say, I can't believe this is happening, because you have believed it could happen and mentally rehearsed your response. In a way, you've been there, done that, at least in your mind. This steals a lot of fear's thunder. So how do we do this without spiraling into anxiety? The key difference between Stoic negative visualization and plain worry is control and purpose. When we worry anxiously, our thoughts are chaotic and emotionally charged. We imagine horrors and feel helpless. In Stoic practice, you calmly and briefly picture a negative event as an observer, consider how you would deal with it, and then let it go. The goal is not to dwell in fear, but to build familiarity and resilience. Think of a firefighter doing drills for various emergency scenarios. They don't do it to panic themselves. They do it so that if a fire comes, they've already seen it in training and can respond effectively rather than freeze. Let's try a simple negative visualization. Suppose you deeply fear losing your job, a common anxiety. Instead of letting that fear fester unchallenged, you might sit down when you are in a calm state and consciously imagine, all right, what if I did lose my job? Envision the details, you get the notice, you feel the shock. Now walk yourself through it. Yes, it would be tough, but what would you do next? Maybe you'd cut expenses, file for unemployment benefits, reach out to contacts, update your resume, start applying elsewhere. You might imagine the emotional difficulty, telling your family, feeling embarrassed, and then imagine yourself coping, one day at a time. Perhaps you see yourself learning from it or finding a new path. By the end of this visualization, you may realize, if that happens, it would not be the end of my life. It'd be hard, but I could handle it. You might even identify steps to take now as precautions, like saving more money or networking. The fear of the unknown job loss shrinks because it's not completely unknown to you anymore. You've stared it in the face and see a way through. Seneca himself practiced what he preached. He famously would periodically live as if he were poor, even while he was a wealthy man. For a few days, he'd wear simple, rough clothing, eat the cheapest foods, bread and water, for example, and sleep on a hard mat, asking himself, is this the condition I so feared? By simulating poverty, Seneca found that the worst he feared wasn't actually that bad. He could live with very little if he had to. This practice made him more confident that, should fortune take his wealth, he'd survive it. It also made him grateful for the comfort he did have on normal days. This is another side effect of negative visualization: gratitude. When you vividly imagine loss, you often come out of it appreciating what you have more. If you imagine losing your health, when you open your eyes and you're healthy, you feel a surge of thankfulness. If you imagine having no friends, you'll cherish the next friendly text you get, rather than take it for granted. Important note: negative visualization should be done sparingly and strategically. The Stoics didn't advise dwelling on worst cases 24/7. That would be depressing. Instead, they might do it once in a while, like a mental exercise or meditation. It could be a brief thought in the morning. Today I will remember that my loved ones are mortal, and so I will not take them for granted. That's a gentle negative visualization, acknowledging mortality, that can make you kinder and more present with those people today. Or before a big event, you might think, what if this goes wrong? And answer it. Then also think, what if it goes right? Covering both sides and then proceeding with your plan. By practicing negative visualization, you accomplish a few things. Desensitization. The scary scenario becomes less shocking. You're less afraid of it because you've confronted it mentally. Problem solving. You often realize you have the resources or resilience to deal with it, which boosts confidence. Gratitude. It reminds you that life is fragile and that many things you fear losing are valuable now, so you appreciate them more instead of anxiously clinging. Perspective. It distinguishes between pain and ruin. Yes, losing a job, a relationship, or money would be painful, but would it ruin you utterly? Stoics say, likely not unless you let it. You are more than these externals. Knowing this cuts fear down to size. One more story. There's an anecdote of a Stoic-adjacent philosopher. Later on, let's take Emperor Julian as an example, who used to have a servant periodically interrupt him with the reminder, remember, you will die. It sounds morbid, but it was essentially a memento mori practice. More on that later. And a negative visualization of the ultimate end. Rather than making him morose, it invigorated him to live well now and not waste time on trivial fears. If even death, the worst case for life itself, can be faced with composure, then all lesser fears lose a lot of their bite. After doing a negative visualization exercise, it's important to then let it go. You don't want to get stuck in a loop of, oh no, this will happen. You say to yourself, okay, that could happen. If it does, I'll manage. Now back to focusing on what I can do today. You return to the present, tie in with the last part, with a clearer mind. By preparing for adversity in this way, you build a kind of inner anti-fragility you gain from the practice of difficulties. It's like sparring in a gym so that a real match is easier. And ironically, by imagining the worst, you often realize the worst isn't as bad as unchecked fear made it out to be. As Seneca assures us, anticipating trials takes away their power when they arrive. Now that we've learned how to mentally prepare for tough times, let's look at how enduring real challenges can actually build resilience, and why the Stoics believed adversity is not something to run from, but something that can make us stronger. 7. Build resilience through adversity. Stoic endurance training. Nobody likes adversity for its own sake. It's hard, it's painful, and it tests us. Yet paradoxically, facing challenges is the only way to become truly resilient and strong. The Stoics understood this deeply. They observed that a person who's never dealt with difficulties is actually more vulnerable when life inevitably throws a curveball. Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." That might sound strange. Why would someone with no troubles be unhappy? Seneca's point is that without challenges, you never get to test your character, never know what you're capable of, and you might crumble at the first sign of trouble because you've never been tempered by trials. Like a muscle that never gets exercise, an untested spirit is weak. Conversely, each time you endure a hardship, you build inner strength and confidence for the future. Think of physical training. If you never push your body, never lift something heavy, or run a bit farther than is comfortable, the muscles remain weak, the endurance low. It's the stress of exercise that stimulates growth and greater capacity. Stoics say the same about our mind and character. Each adversity is like a workout for the soul. It's definitely not fun while it's happening. Just like doing that last set of push-ups might burn, but it leaves you stronger. Once you realize this, you can start to approach life's obstacles with a new attitude, not as curses to bemoan, but as opportunities to practice resilience and become better. Let's consider some examples. An athlete training for a marathon will purposefully run in the rain, on hills, in the heat, uncomfortable conditions, because come race day, they'll be ready for anything. A student might take a really challenging course knowing it will be tough, but also knowing it will expand their knowledge and sharpen their skills. In personal life, someone might deliberately practice small discomforts, similar to Seneca's poverty tests, like taking cold showers or waking up early to run. These little challenges fortify the mind's ability to do hard things. Then when uninvited difficulties arrive, as they inevitably will, maybe a job loss, illness, or heartbreak, a person who has built resilience is better equipped to handle them with courage and poise. One shining Stoic example of resilience is Epictetus himself. Recall from earlier, Epictetus was born a slave. He was even physically disabled. One story goes that his leg was deliberately broken by a cruel master, leaving him lame. Talk about adversity. Yet Epictetus focused on what he could control, his mind and reaction, and not on pitying himself for what he couldn't, his servitude or injury. He famously said, if he was exiled, which eventually he was later in life, he can't control being sent away, but he can control how he responds to exile. As a slave, he chose to study philosophy intensely when given the chance. Later freed, he became one of the most influential Stoic teachers in Rome and Greece. Epictetus turned extreme hardship into fuel for wisdom. The key was his mindset. He saw every hardship as training. If he could endure slavery, what could ever truly scare him after that? His endurance muscle was strong. In fact, Epictetus compared life to a wrestling match, and the gods as good coaches who match you with tougher opponents, challenges, as you improve, so you can reach your full potential. Seneca also noted, no man is crushed by misfortune unless he has first been deceived by prosperity. Meaning, if you expect life to be easy, the first hardship will feel crushing. But if you expect challenges and face them, you won't be destroyed by them. This viewpoint doesn't celebrate misfortune. It just acknowledges it as a reality and finds an empowering way to frame it. Every time you survive a trial, it adds to your life story and toolkit. It proves to you that you can handle more than you thought. There's a practice in Stoicism called premeditatio malorum, or premeditation of evils, which we've touched on with negative visualization. It's proactively anticipating potential troubles and sometimes even rehearsing them, as Seneca did by living simply to build resilience. Another practice is voluntary discomfort, like occasionally fasting even when food is plentiful, to show yourself you can. These practices overlap with negative visualization and serve the purpose of resilience building. If you have willingly done without luxuries or faced discomfort, you know that involuntary loss or discomfort, should it occur, is survivable. Let's bring this to a personal, modern context. Suppose you face a setback like failing an important exam, or getting rejected from a job you wanted, or going through a painful breakup. In the moment, it hurts and fear might arise. Fear of being a failure, fear of never finding love, etc. A Stoic approach would encourage you to think, this is my opportunity to practice resilience. Yes, this is hard, but here's a chance to prove to myself I can withstand hardship. I can get up, dust off, learn from this, and be stronger. In fact, in hindsight, I might even be grateful for this experience because it will make me a tougher, wiser person. As Seneca said, someone who's never been through anything can't develop greatness. We tend to admire people who have been through the fire and emerge with wisdom and strength. Now, life is giving you that test. Painful, yes, but it's forging you. It helps to remember past adversities you've overcome. Did you ever think during a past challenge, I'll never get through this, but here you are, alive and maybe even better for it? Remind yourself of those victories. Each one was a resilience gym session. It's also worth noting, Resilience isn't about never feeling distress or fear. It's about carrying on despite it and eventually reducing it. A resilient person still feels pain and concern, but they don't let it stop them. They might bend, but they don't break. Over time, what used to scare or upset them doesn't so much because they've gained confidence. I got through worse before, I can handle this too. It's a virtuous cycle. The more you face, the stronger you get, the more you can face. One more metaphor the Stoics used. Life's adversities are like fortifying a fortress. Every attack you withstand makes the fortress stronger for the next one, because you repair and reinforce the walls. If no one ever attacks, the fortress might look fine, but you don't know if it has structural weaknesses until it's tested, and then it might be too late. So be thankful when you patch a crack after a battle. You're safer for the next siege. In practical terms, how can you practice resilience if you're not currently in a crisis? You can simulate small challenges. Take on a difficult project willingly. Push yourself in a workout. Have that tough conversation you've been avoiding. Don't shy away from all discomfort. By meeting some voluntarily, you prepare for those that are involuntary. And if you are in a crisis right now, know that this is your training montage. It's hard, but it's forging something in you that peace and ease never could. Having resilience leads right into our next topic, which is learning to detach from outcomes. This goes hand in hand with facing adversity, because often our fear and pain come from clinging too tightly to specific results. The Stoics teach us to do our best, but then flow with whatever happens. Let's explore that, because it's a game changer for anxiety. 8. Detach from outcomes, focus on effort and character. One major source of fear is our attachment to specific outcomes. We desperately want things to turn out a certain way. I must get that promotion. This project has to succeed. My performance has to be perfect. And we fear that if the outcome isn't what we want, it will be awful. The Stoics have a remedy for this. Detach from the outcome and focus on what you can actually control: your effort, your actions, and your attitude. Do your very best in whatever you undertake. But once you've done what you can, let the dice land as they may, to borrow a metaphor they used. Your peace should not be hostage to external results. Epictetus put it like this: in our control are our actions, not in our control are the outcomes. We touched on this in part 2. He advised that we should play our part well, but remember that we don't get to write the whole script. For example, an archer can aim and release the arrow with skill. That's his part. But whether it hits the bullseye also depends on factors like a gust of wind or the target moving, which are out of his hands. If he's done his best, he can be at peace, even if the result wasn't perfect. In our lives, this means care about what you do, not about the badge or reward at the end. Ironically, by focusing on effort over results, you often perform better and suffer less anxiety. Marcus Aurelius has a wonderful quote in this vein: never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. Think about that. Don't let fixation on a future outcome disturb your mind now. You will deal with whatever comes using your wisdom and strength at that time. So why agonize now about, will I win or lose? Will I get what I want or not? Focus on today's work. The future will unfold and you'll handle it then. This attitude is incredibly freeing. It removes the heavy pressure of, I must succeed or else, that often sabotages us with fear. Instead, you say, I will give my all, and whatever happens, I'll be okay. I can handle either outcome. This doesn't mean you become indifferent or lazy. It actually allows you to work and live with calm intensity, unburdened by dread. You still set goals and pursue them, but you hold them lightly, like holding a bird in your hand, gently, not squeezing it to death. The Stoics talk about living according to nature, which in part means cooperating with how things turn out, not railing against reality if it doesn't match our wishes. Seneca said, "The wise man is content with his lot, whatever it may be, without wishing for what he has not. That is detachment in practice. It doesn't mean you don't strive. It means after striving, you accept the result with equanimity and move forward. Let's try an example. Imagine you've prepared hard for a business presentation to land a big client. Of course you want the client to sign the deal. That's the outcome you prefer. A non-Stoic approach might be to obsess over that outcome. I have to land this. If I don't, everything's ruined, causing sleepless nights and massive anxiety during the presentation, which ironically could make your performance worse. The Stoic approach: prepare diligently, since that's in your control. Then go into the presentation focusing on conveying your message clearly and passionately. Effort in the moment. Do your best. If the client says yes, great. If they say no, you might naturally feel disappointment, but you won't be devastated. You'll think, all right, I did what I could. Perhaps it wasn't the right fit, or something beyond my control influenced it. What can I learn from this for next time? Let's adjust and keep going. You haven't tied your entire self-worth or happiness to that single deal. You remain adaptive. This detachment also prepares you to face uncertainty with more courage. Many fears are fears of the unknown. Will this or that happen? When you cultivate an attitude of, whatever happens, I'll make the best of it, which is essentially amor fati, loving one's fate, which we'll delve into soon, the unknown loses its terror. It's like saying to the future, I'm ready for either outcome. You become, in a sense, invincible to external twists and turns, because your satisfaction comes from knowing you'll respond virtuously, not from everything going your way. Consider also creative or performance endeavors. A musician performing on stage, a student taking an exam, an actor auditioning. If they are obsessed with the outcome, applause, a top grade, getting the part, they might choke under pressure or not perform at their peak due to fear. If instead they focus on the process, playing the music with feeling, answering the questions they know, acting the role the best they can, they are more likely to get into a flow and actually do well. And even if the audience is cold, or the exam was tougher than expected, or the casting director says, no thanks, the Stoic-minded performer can say, I gave it my sincere best. That is under my control and I did right by it. I can be at peace with that. The rest was never guaranteed. A helpful practice is to remind yourself daily, Marcus Aurelius style, that outcomes are never fully in your hands. This isn't negative, it's reality. By reminding yourself, you paradoxically feel less fear because you stop assuming you have total control. You accept uncertainty as part of life. Try starting a project by literally saying, I embark on this and I commit to doing my part well. The outcome, I leave to the universe. When you catch yourself ruminating, what if it fails? Respond with, if it fails, I'll handle it and learn. Worrying now doesn't change that outcome. It only ruins my present. Replace the worry with a focus on what task you can do right now. Seneca also said something comforting. The wise man is neither elated by prosperity nor depressed by adversity, for he has always endeavored to rely chiefly on himself and to derive all joy from himself. This means if you ground your happiness in your own virtuous actions and mindset, external successes or failures won't swing you wildly. You become more steady. People might even say, wow, you handle setbacks really well, or you're so humble and cool-headed even when you succeed. That's the Stoic ideal. Modest in good times, graceful in bad times, because you're not owned by outcomes. This strategy of detaching from results naturally reduces fear of failure or loss. If your identity isn't on the line with every outcome, you can approach challenges with a sense of play or duty rather than dread. Think of it like a knight going into a tournament for honor. They fight hard, but if they lose, they bow and live to fight another day. They don't see it as the end of the world, just part of the game. At this point, you might be thinking, this is great in theory, But what about those deep, sometimes irrational fears that seem to linger, like fear of failure itself, or fear driven by what others expect of us, or societal pressures? That brings us to the next section, where we'll dive deeper into understanding the roots of our fears, distinguishing which are rational and which are not, and how philosophy, especially Stoicism, helps us make sense of them and break free. 9. Make sense of your fears. Identify rational versus irrational fears. Fear isn't always logical. Sometimes we're terrified of things that, if we step back, don't truly threaten our survival or well-being. These are irrational fears. Other times, fear points to something real we need to address. These can be called rational fears, like a fear that keeps you from stepping too close to a cliff edge. That's useful. A big part of overcoming fear is learning to sort out which fears make sense and which are baseless, exaggerated, or products of social pressure. The Stoic philosophers were essentially early psychologists in this regard. They urged us to examine our fears critically, to understand their origin, and to use reason to respond to them rather than blind emotion. Epictetus said that the main task of philosophy is to respond to the soul's cry, to make sense of and free ourselves from our griefs and fears. What a beautiful way to put it. Philosophy, not in an ivory tower sense, but practical wisdom, is here to help our soul that is crying out in fear by helping us understand and soothe those fears. So let's do a bit of that. First, ask yourself when a fear arises. Is this fear about a true necessity or danger? Or is it about losing something I simply desire or some social image? Many of our modern anxieties are tied to things we've been conditioned to want or to think we need, but they aren't true survival needs. For instance, fear of losing your job might feel like a survival fear. After all, income is tied to food and shelter, but often the fear is way beyond the reality. You might not actually be on the brink of homelessness. Perhaps the deeper fear is shame or judgment if you have a career setback. Or maybe you fear not affording a certain lifestyle, the car, the nice house, the private school for the kids, etc. That society tells you defines success. Distinguishing the layers is crucial. Are you afraid of starving, or are you afraid of downgrading your car? One is a rational concern, the other is likely a social or ego concern. Seneca wrote about this difference. He noted that people often fear things not because those things are inherently dreadful, but because of our opinion of them, or because society has labeled them bad. For example, poverty was seen as a great misfortune. Seneca challenged that. If your basic needs are met, is being poor, i.e. not wealthy, truly so terrible? Or is it only terrible because we love luxury and fear shame? He went further to say often, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Meaning a lot of our fears are imaginary in the sense that we blow them up in our heads. The actual event, if it happened, would be easier than the torment of anticipating it. Let's look at some common fears through a Stoic lens. Fear of failure in career or endeavors. What is really at stake? Usually it's ego, status, or the expectations we think others have of us. Failing an exam, not getting a promotion, having a business flop. These feel like the end of the world, but they're not death or torture. They're blows to pride. Stoics would remind, failure is a teacher, not a death sentence. And they'd ask, why do you need external success to feel okay? Is it because you're defining your worth by it, or because you fear others' judgment? Probably both. Once you see that, you can start releasing the irrational part, the notion that failing makes you worthless or unloved. It doesn't. It just means something you tried didn't work that way that time. Your fear was exaggerated by a false belief that you must be perfect or always win. Fear of other people's opinions. This is huge for many of us. We fear judgment, ridicule, or disapproval. Epictetus noted how enslaved we can become to the thoughts of others, even though those thoughts are outside our control. He basically said, trying to control or overly worry about others' opinion is foolish. It's not up to us. And ironically, as a wise commentator pointed out, people don't actually think about us as much as we fear they do. We often project our insecurities onto others, imagining they're scrutinizing our every move, when really everyone is mostly caught up in their own life. Once you grasp this, that fear becomes quite irrational. We're terrified of phantoms in our own mind. And even when people do judge or gossip, Stoics would say, so what? Does their opinion change who you are? If you know you're acting with integrity, then others' negative opinions, born of misunderstanding or bias, shouldn't deter you. Irrational fear here is giving too much weight to external approval, which no one can secure all the time. The rational approach: do the right thing and accept that some will approve and some won't. That's life. Fear is driven by consumer culture. Modern life constantly sells us the idea that we need certain products or lifestyle markers to be happy. This creates new anxieties: fear of missing out, FOMO, fear of not keeping up with peers, not having the latest phone or a big enough house, fear that our life is inadequate. The Stoics, especially someone like Musonius Rufus or Epictetus, would laugh at this. They'd point out these are manufactured fears, not natural ones. A Spartan-like Stoic view: as long as you have basic food, shelter, and clothing, you're fine. The rest is gravy. The fact that we might fear losing our second car, or not being able to afford vacations, or our kids not having designer clothes, these are not rational in the sense that they don't threaten our true needs or moral character. They're societal expectations we've internalized. Understanding that doesn't mean you drop all ambition or comforts, but it can free you from fearing their loss. You might prefer to keep them, but you won't live in terror of losing stuff or status once you see it's not truly essential. Fear of change or uncertainty. Humans like predictability, so uncertainty breeds anxiety. But Stoicism teaches that change is the nature of the universe. Resisting it is like resisting seasons or the flow of a river. If you fear change, maybe examine what exactly you think you'll lose. Often it's the comfort of the familiar, but every change also brings new opportunities. Rationally, since change is inevitable, fearing it is futile and only causes suffering. Better to focus on how you can adapt. Stoic wisdom says, don't hope that events will go as you wish, but wish them to go as they do, and you will be content. That means rather than fearing the unknown, embrace it as part of life's flow. We'll talk more about amor fati, loving fate, soon. A great Stoic exercise is to explicitly list your fears and then reason about each one. What actual harm am I fearing here? Is it physical or just emotional ego? If the worst happens, what then? Could I endure it? What would I have left that truly matters? Often you'll find the feared scenario is not as devastating as your gut reaction suggests. And for those that are truly serious, like fear for a loved one's health, you realize why you fear, love and care, which is noble, and that worrying alone doesn't help them, but supporting them does. You channel that fear into positive action or appreciation. Philosophy, especially Stoicism, helps us by shining the light of reason on fear. It doesn't mean we eliminate every emotional twinge. We're human, not robots. But it means we don't let those twitches spiral out of control unexamined. We interrogate our fear. Hello, fear, what are you really about? Do you make sense? Sometimes just doing this lessens the fear significantly because you step into observer, analyst role instead of helpless victim of the fear. Epictetus encouraged his students to essentially become philosophers of their own fear. He'd say, when you're afraid, it's often your beliefs that are scaring you, not the thing. Change the belief and the fear lessens. Example: if I believe if I lose my job, I'm ruined, I'll panic. If I change that belief to losing this job would be hard, but I'm resourceful and could find a way to manage, the panic subsides into concern or motivation. The first belief was irrationally catastrophic. The second is rational and empowering. Stoics also noted that culture can breed fears. In one culture, people might fear dishonoring the family in some way that in another culture wouldn't matter, or fear of certain taboos that are actually arbitrary. Recognizing that some fears are culturally learned can free you to question, do I personally need to carry this fear, or is it just something I absorbed? A fun example. Many people fear something like public speaking, largely because it's become a cliche that public speaking is scary. But imagine a culture where from young, everyone is used to reciting in front of others. That fear wouldn't be so prevalent. So clearly some fears are taught. What can be learned can be unlearned or at least subdued. Finally, one of the best ways to overcome irrational fears is to face them in reality, gradually. The Stoics didn't articulate exposure therapy per se, but they kind of intuitively knew it. Doing the thing you fear in small doses can prove to you it's not lethal and you grow braver. If you fear heights, safely exposing yourself to heights a bit at a time often reduces the fear. If you fear rejection, deliberately making small requests that might get refused, like asking a stranger for a small favor, can thicken your skin and show, hey, a no didn't kill me or make me less worthy. There's actually a modern practice called rejection therapy, where people aim to get a no once a day just to stop fearing it. Very Stoic in spirit. The idea is, face the phantom, see it's not a monster. So get philosophical about your fears, break them down, challenge the logic, and where they're irrational, laugh at them a little, and push yourself gently to defy them. Where they're rational, use them as signals for prudent action. Like a fear of illness can motivate a healthier lifestyle, that's rational. The more you make sense of fear, the less hold it has. Now, having dissected fear in our minds, let's pivot to a powerful Stoic mindset that can transform how we view all events in life, fearful or not. The principle of amor fati, or loving one's fate, essentially learning to embrace whatever happens as part of your story and good in some way. This will tie together much of what we discussed and take it to an even higher level of resilience and fearlessness. 10. Embrace life's trials, the power of amor fati. Imagine adopting an attitude where instead of dreading what might happen, you say in your heart, whatever happens, I will embrace it as part of my story, even as something I can love or use. This is the spirit of amor fati, a Latin phrase meaning love of fate. While the specific phrase was popularized by later thinkers, the seeds of this idea are in Stoicism. It's a mindset of total acceptance of life's events, even the tough ones, not just accepting them grudgingly, but actively seeing them as necessary and in some sense good, or at least good for you, in that they provide opportunity to practice virtue or grow. Epictetus captured a piece of this when he said, don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do, and your life will go smoothly. In other words, don't fight reality, align your will with it. He even advised in facing hardship to say, this is what I needed, because it's been sent to you to test or improve you. And here's a bold one from Epictetus. I must die. Must I then die lamenting? I must be put in chains. Must I then also lament? I will not play the coward. His point, things like death or exile, chains might happen. He can't avoid that fate. But how he meets them is under his control, and he chooses to meet them without fear. He even said at one point, exile, death, poverty, none of these are inherently dreadful. The only thing to really fear is fear itself, or a cowardly spirit that shrinks from life's inevitable demands. Sound familiar? Yes, long before Franklin D. Roosevelt said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, Stoics were essentially teaching that the true enemy is not the external hardship, but the fear inside us. Overcome that, and hardship loses its fangs. One dramatic example, Epictetus himself was exiled by the Emperor Domitian around 93 AD. Domitian banished all philosophers from Rome. Here was Epictetus, thrown out from his home city, having to start over in a foreign land. Nicopolis in Greece. He didn't bemoan his fate. In fact, he simply set up a new school in Nicopolis and kept teaching happily. Exile, which many would consider a disaster, didn't break him. Why? Because he practiced amor fati in effect. He accepted it. He likely thought, well, the emperor sends me away. That is outside my control. What is in my control is making the best of it. Maybe it's an opportunity to spread philosophy elsewhere. And that's exactly what he did. Students flocked to him in Nicopolis. His discourses were written down and survived through history, influencing millions. If not for exile, maybe Epictetus's teachings wouldn't have reached so far. So the misfortune turned into a kind of fortune? This is how Stoics turn things on their head. They trust that if fate hands them something, there's some way to use it for good, to alchemize it into growth or virtue or insight. This trust in fate makes one much more fearless, because you start believing, no matter what happens, it can serve me in some way. There's a reason, a lesson, or a chance to excel hidden in it. Now, embracing trials doesn't mean you have to enjoy pain or never work to change a bad situation. It means emotionally you don't resist that it's happening. You accept, this is my reality now. How can I make the most of it? That question is empowering compared to why me? This shouldn't be, which just amplifies fear and suffering. Consider modern examples. Many great success stories come directly from failures or hard times. The entrepreneur whose first two businesses failed, those failures taught them crucial lessons and toughness, so the third one succeeded. In hindsight, they might even feel thankful those failures happened. Or think of someone who lost a job, which felt devastating, but that pushed them to start their own company or change careers to something they truly love. Later they say, getting fired was the best thing that happened to me. That's amor fati in real life. The initial fear and pain of the loss transformed into something valuable. A personal anecdote, composite example. I had a friend who worked on a big creative project for years. It was like her baby, and it ultimately didn't get the recognition she hoped. She was heartbroken at first, but in embracing that outcome, she discovered two things. One, the process had taught her skills and connected her with people that opened new doors. Two, it freed her to pursue a different path she found even more fulfilling. She told me later, if that project had succeeded easily, I would have stayed in that lane and missed out on what I'm doing now. The failure redirected me. That's amor fati thinking. Instead of fearing or resenting failure, seeing it as a twist in the plot that leads to a new chapter. The Stoics also often use the metaphor of life as a play or a game set up by the gods in our nature. Our role is to play our part the best we can, not to choose the part. If fate gives you a small part, say a short life or a quiet career, play it well. If fate gives you a challenging part, illness, loss, play that well too, meaning show courage, dignity, compassion, whatever virtue applies. By viewing it this way, fear diminishes because nothing that happens is wrong. It's just a different role to enact. This idea can be incredibly consoling. Instead of feeling this shouldn't be happening, you think, so this is the scenario I get to tackle. All right, challenge accepted. It's almost like turning life into a series of missions or quests, rather than a series of threats. One crucial note, amor fati does not equal apathy. It's not whatever, I don't care. It's quite the opposite. It's caring deeply about engaging with reality wholeheartedly. It's saying yes to the full tapestry of life, the joys and sorrows. It's being like a great sailor who loves the sea so much that they even love the storms because those allow them to use their seamanship fully and feel alive. The Stoics admired people who turned personal tragedy into triumph of character. For example, they loved the story of Agrippinus, a Stoic politician, who, upon being informed that the Emperor Nero might exile or execute him the next day, calmly said something like, "Well, if I'm summoned, I'll go. If not, I'll have lunch as usual." He refused to let fear alter his principles. That was his victory, his way of spiting misfortune by staying himself. So practically, how do we cultivate amor fati day to day? A few tips. Remind yourself that life is change and challenge. When a difficulty comes, instead of "why me?" say "why not me?" Here's my chance to do something with this. This reframing immediately lowers fear because you're not seeing it as an enemy, but as rough terrain you can navigate. Reflect on past hardships that turned out to be for the best or taught you something. Use those as evidence to trust current and future hardships might serve you too. This builds a kind of faith in the process of life. Say yes instead of no internally. A minor example, it starts raining on your day out. Instead of seething that your plan is ruined, mentally say, "All right, I accept the rain. Maybe I'll make this an adventure in the rain, or it gives me a cozy day inside. Fine." You'll feel the angst dissipate. Now scale that up to bigger things, lost opportunities, sudden changes, etc. The quicker you get to, "Yes, this is happening, let's deal with it," the less fear lingers. Visualize yourself as resilient and bigger than any one event. See yourself as the hero of your movie. The hero goes through ups and downs, but that's what makes the story great. Embrace that narrative mindset. This setback is training montage time. It can almost be exciting. Fear transforms into a kind of resolve or curiosity about how you'll overcome. Finally, Stoics believe that greatness is often born of trial. The people who achieve wisdom, courage, or impact in life often have been cooked in the furnace of adversity. Marcus Aurelius led Rome through plagues and wars. Terrible stuff, but it forged him into a philosopher king whose insights we still cherish. If he had an easy reign, maybe his journal would be far less rich. In our own lives, the qualities we're proud of or the wisdom we have often come from having gone through something. Knowing this, we can almost welcome challenges with a healthy dose of nerves, sure, but not pure fear. It's like, "All right, life, I see you. You're giving me a new mountain to climb. Let's get the gear and do this." Amor fati is a high bar, loving whatever happens. We might not always get to love in the moment. Pain hurts, loss hurts. But we can at least accept and later, perhaps see it was for the best or find gratitude for the experience. Even if we can't love the event, we can love what we do with it. And that alone takes us beyond fear into creativity and courage. Now, with that empowering mindset, let's explore another encouraging idea: believing in your own capacity for greatness despite circumstances. If amor fati is about embracing fate, the next part is about not using fate as an excuse, recognizing that within whatever fate hands you, you can do amazing things. Epictetus lived it, and we have modern parallels too. So let's talk about believing in your ability to do wonders, even when life is hard. 11. Believe in your ability to do great things, even under limitations. One of the most inspiring lessons from Stoicism is that your circumstances do not determine your potential. You can face immense obstacles and still achieve meaningful, even extraordinary things if you nurture inner virtues and perseverance. Epictetus is a prime example we've already discussed. Born a slave, physically injured, and yet he rose to become a revered philosopher whose teachings influenced even the emperor Marcus Aurelius. Epictetus could easily have thought, "I'm doomed to obscurity or misery because of my station." But instead, he believed in the power of his mind and character to transcend external limitations. He once said that every difficulty in life is an invitation to do what wonders you can with it. This belief in one's inner capacity is a huge antidote to fear. Fear often whispers, "You can't handle this. You're not strong or good enough. If X happens, you'll be finished." Stoicism shouts back, "You are stronger than you think, and you'll discover your strength when tested." Your job is to trust that and act on it. Let's bring this to a relatable scenario. Say you've had a series of setbacks, maybe academic failures or business failures. It's easy to develop a fear of trying again, a fear that maybe I'm just not cut out for success. Stoic wisdom and countless real-life stories suggest that persistence often creates surprising turnarounds. Believe that you can do great things, not in a delusional, I can do anything without effort way, but in the sense that effort over time yields results even for the underdog. There's a story often told in modern productivity circles about an author whose book was rejected 30 times by publishers. Imagine the fear and doubt creeping in after so much rejection, but he kept submitting. That book eventually got accepted and became a hit. If he had let fear of, maybe I'm not good enough, stop him at rejection number 30, he'd never know what could have been. A podcast story that aligns with this. Consider someone who starts a podcast or YouTube channel. In the beginning, hardly anyone listens. Episode after episode might only get a handful of views. Fear and self-doubt loom. Is this pointless? Am I embarrassing myself? Should I quit? Many famous creators talk about this phase, but those who believed in their message and kept going often found that after perhaps 50 episodes of near silence, suddenly one clicks or an audience slowly builds. Persistence pays off. The key was that they believed in their ability to create something valuable eventually, even if immediate results were zero. They acted despite fear of failure or ridicule. And as Epictetus would remind, outcome is not in our control, effort is, so they focused on effort. Believing in your ability doesn't mean you'll definitely get what you envision, but it means you give yourself the best chance, and you won't live with the regret of having given up prematurely. And even if you don't get exactly what you aim for, you often find something valuable along the way. Maybe your podcast never blows up huge, but through it you connected with a core group of people or honed your speaking skills, which leads to an unexpected opportunity. Life is full of such twists. The Stoic approach is, do not let the fear of, I might not succeed, stop you from applying yourself. Because the attempt itself is growth, and sometimes the results come in forms you didn't predict. Another perspective. Greatness is revealed through hardship. Think of a hero in any story. Their greatness is shown by how they deal with crises. No hero is great in a vacuum of ease. So when you face something tough, consider that this is your hero moment. Believing in your ability means trusting that within you are the qualities needed to meet this challenge. You might not see them clearly until you're forced to use them. Many people discover strengths only when circumstances demand it. A shy person finds courage when a loved one needs defending. A self-proclaimed disorganized person becomes astonishingly efficient when starting a passion project they care about. Stoicism would say, we have seeds of virtue and talent in us, and adversity is like the water and sunlight that can make them sprout. Let me share an illustrative anecdote. There was a young man in ancient Athens, Demosthenes, who wanted to be a great orator, but he had weak lungs, a speech impediment, and was mocked for his speaking attempts. He very easily could have shrunk away in fear, concluding, I'm just not meant to speak. But he believed he could overcome these limitations with effort. It's said he practiced speeches with pebbles in his mouth to improve articulation, and he trained his voice by projecting over the roar of ocean waves. Over years, he transformed into one of the greatest speakers of antiquity. That's an extreme case, but the point is, belief in his potential propelled him to put in the work, whereas fear of humiliation could have stopped him at the start. In daily life, believing in your capability might simply mean giving yourself pep talks rather than criticism. Stoics like Marcus Aurelius often wrote pep talks to themselves. You can endure this. You've survived many things. Get back up. Writing or speaking affirmations rooted in truth. I have learned many things. I am capable of learning this too. I've handled difficulties before. I will handle this. Can bolster courage. It's not cheesy, it's aligning your mind with a positive truth instead of a negative assumption. It's also helpful to surround yourself or fill your mind with examples of others who overcame odds. Stoic texts themselves are full of admiration for Socrates, Diogenes, and other figures who exemplified virtue under pressure. Today, we might read biographies of people who persisted through failures or hardships. These stories ignite that flame in us. If they could, maybe I can too. It normalizes struggle as part of the journey rather than a verdict on your worth. What if your situation is extremely limiting right now? Say you're dealing with a chronic illness or severe financial trouble or discrimination. Stoicism never downplays that those are tough, but it would encourage finding where your power still lies. Maybe you can't change certain externals, but you can change your mindset, educate yourself, seek help, or pivot to a new approach. History and present are full of individuals who did something remarkable because of their limitations, not just in spite of them. For instance, many social leaders fought against discrimination precisely because they experienced it, turning personal pain into fuel for social change. If they had believed I'm powerless, they wouldn't have tried. To boil it down, don't write yourself off. Fear tries to write a story of your defeat before the battle is even fought. You must refuse to accept that script. Instead, write a story of, I'm not done yet. I can improve, I can adapt, I can find a way. By doing so, you cut fear off at the knees. You replace I can't with I will do my utmost, and that is enough. And sometimes that utmost produces outcomes far beyond what fear would have allowed you to dream. Now, with a strong belief in ourselves established, we need to tackle a fear that often cripples our authentic action, the fear of what other people think of us. It's one of the most common anxieties and can derail our pursuit of personal greatness or truth. Stoicism has a lot to say about standing firm in your values, regardless of others' opinions. So let's explore that next. 12th, don't fear others' judgment. Stay true to your path. It's human nature to want approval and to fear disapproval. But if we become slaves to others' opinions, we severely limit our lives. We might not speak up for what's right, not pursue our true interests, or constantly live with anxiety about how we're perceived. Epictetus warned that seeking outside approval is a quick way to lose our integrity and freedom. He said, if you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. This stark advice means that if you're always worried about people thinking you're foolish, you'll never take the steps, which might be unpopular or misunderstood at first, needed for growth. You have to be okay with some people not getting you or even laughing at you, especially when you choose a path less traveled or stick to your principles. Let's contrast two archetypes from ancient times that Epictetus and other Stoics often did. The Stoic philosopher versus the sophist. Sophists in ancient Greece were teachers who were often more concerned with winning arguments and gaining applause than with actually pursuing truth or virtue. They'd say whatever got claps. The Stoics, on the other hand, aimed to live by truth and virtue even if it meant criticism or being unpopular. Epictetus basically said, do you want to be like the sophists who perform for the crowd? Or like Socrates, the model philosopher, who sought truth and goodness even at the cost of his life? Socrates was executed by his city for sticking to his principles and challenging popular opinions. He didn't fear others' judgment or even death as much as he feared doing wrong or living a lie. That's integrity at the highest level. While we, hopefully, won't face such extreme stakes, the principle holds. Caring too much about what others think can compromise who we are and what we might become. Ask yourself, how many opportunities or authentic expressions have I lost to fear of judgment? Maybe you didn't wear something you liked, or you stayed quiet about an idea, or you held back your true personality, all because of that inner voice saying, they'll think I'm weird or dumb. It's a kind of self-censorship out of fear. The Stoics would gently or sometimes bluntly say, those others' opinions are outside your control and fleeting anyway. People's opinions change with the wind, and frankly, most are too busy worrying about themselves to judge us as harshly as we imagine. And even if they do judge or gossip, what does it really do to us? Usually nothing material. It's our ego that feels bruised. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often how irrelevant fame and approval are in the grand scheme. In a generation or two, both the praiser and praised are dead. So why twist yourself into knots for that? Here's a liberating thought. Accept that you will be judged no matter what you do. You literally cannot avoid it because people have opinions automatically. If you try to be invisible, some might judge you as shy or uninteresting. If you stand out, some admire and some sneer. If you follow tradition, some call you conformist. If you break the mold, some call you crazy. There's no path that guarantees universal approval. Once you truly accept that, a lot of fear falls away. You might as well do what you feel is right and meaningful, since judgment is unavoidable. We often overestimate how much negative judgment will come and underestimate how much respect or neutrality we'll get. Example, you finally decide to pursue a career change late in life. Something you're passionate about but worried family or peers will mock or not understand. Sure, a couple of people might say, "Huh? Why are you doing that?" But you might be surprised how many say, "Good for you, I wish I had the guts to do that." And even if no one supports you outwardly, you'll find inner fulfillment, which matters more. A Stoic would say the best approval is self-approval, knowing you are living according to your values and reason. Now, practically, how to reduce this fear of judgment. Remember the Epictetus line, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish." Repeat that to yourself in moments of doubt. It's permission to not be perfect in others' eyes. Gradual exposure. Do small things that you typically avoid due to self-consciousness. Maybe it's voicing a minor dissenting opinion in a meeting, or wearing that bright color you like. When you see that the world doesn't implode, maybe someone gives a weird look, but nothing actually harmful occurs, you get bolder for bigger expressions. Focus on a few trusted opinions, not the crowd. Even Stoics valued feedback from true friends or mentors who share your values. If someone wise says, "You're off track," that's worth listening to. But random people's opinions, or those who don't live your life or have your principles, can be taken with a grain of salt. If I know I'm doing something good or necessary, the disapproval of someone who doesn't understand or share my perspective is not a sign I'm wrong. It might just be a sign I'm different, which is fine. Ask, will this matter in 5 years? Many things we fret over socially are very transient. That embarrassing presentation, that awkward social interaction, in a few months people forget or have their own issues. If it won't matter later, try not to give it so much weight now. Align with your values strongly. The stronger your conviction in what you're doing, the less others' opinions sway you. For example, if your value is honesty and you tell a hard truth, you might get backlash. But if you truly believe honesty is right, that conviction can sustain you through disapproval. You can say like Socrates, "It's better that I be out of tune with the whole world than being one man to be out of tune with myself." Recognize the inevitability of gossip. People talk. Even those who seem to adore you might occasionally say something behind your back. Humans aren't consistent. Stoics often remind themselves not to be surprised by human behavior. Marcus wrote notes like, "Today you will meet people who are meddlers, ungrateful, arrogant, but I have seen goodness too, and I know they are my kin in reason." He prepped for encountering judgmental or rude folks so it didn't catch him off guard. We can do similarly. Some people won't get it or will judge me. That's okay. It's part of life. Refocus on action. Instead of spending energy imagining reactions, spend energy on whatever it is you're doing. Absorb in the doing. When you're deeply engaged, you care less about spectators. Think of kids playing. They aren't constantly looking around for approval. They're just playing. Find that zone in your work or hobby, and you'll notice the fear of judgment fades because you're more interested in the task than in yourself. Also, consider this irony. Often when you stop caring about impressing others, you become more authentic and confident. which actually tends to attract respect and genuine connections. People are often drawn to those who are comfortable in their skin. And if they aren't, well, you won't mesh with everyone, and that's fine. Finally, progress requires risking disapproval. Every innovator, artist, social reformer initially faced naysayers. If they had cowered, nothing would have advanced. We owe many good things to people who were okay being laughed at or criticized at first. Next time you fear looking silly, remember how many great figures looked silly or crazy until they succeeded or time vindicated them. That might give you courage to be a little foolish by society's lights in order to be true to yourself. In sum, Stoicism encourages a kind of quiet confidence. Do the right thing as you see it. Let people think what they will. Over time, your consistent character might even win over some of the skeptics. And if not, you've still won by living authentically. Now, moving from fear of social judgment, we address the deepest fear many have, the fear of death itself. It's a heavy topic, but Stoics approached it head-on with their concept of memento mori, remember you will die. Strangely enough, by confronting mortality, we can live with less fear and more purpose. Let's delve into that. 13. Overcome the fear of death. Memento mori, remember mortality. Death is the ultimate unknown and something we'll all face. It's natural to have some fear of it. It's literally a fear wired into living creatures for survival. However, the excessive fear of death can cast a long shadow over life. It can make us anxious, overly cautious, or unwilling to contemplate important truths. The Stoics believe that accepting and frequently reflecting on mortality is key to living fully and without constant dread. They even had a practice name for it, memento mori, which means remember that you must die. This wasn't meant to be morbid, but rather freeing and clarifying. Epictetus said bluntly, "I cannot escape death, but at least I can escape the fear of it." Think about that. Death itself is certain and out of our control when it comes. Whether we fear it or not, it will happen one day. But the dread of death is something we can work to eliminate, and in doing so, we remove a huge burden. If you fear death too much, it's like having a storm cloud following you all the time. You never truly enjoy sunny days because you're worried about when the rain will hit. Remove that cloud and you can bask in life. How did the Stoics suggest we overcome this fear? By changing our perspective on death through frequent, calm consideration. Here are a few Stoic strategies regarding mortality. Normalize talking and thinking about death. Seneca observed that people fear death more because they keep it at arm's length, like a taboo. He advised discussing and contemplating it often, which paradoxically makes it less terrifying. It's like any fear. Avoidance makes it loom larger. Exposure shrinks it. When you ponder death regularly, it becomes a familiar concept rather than a boogeyman. Realize death is natural and inevitable. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that everything that exists is in a process of change and renewal, and that includes life and death. We are part of nature's cycle. Leaves fall, seasons change. People are born and people die. He'd say it's as natural as anything else. So why see it as evil? It's painful for those left behind, perhaps, but it's not a punishment. It's a progression. Accepting this inevitability can oddly bring peace. It's like coming to terms with any unchangeable fact. Resisting it causes angst. Embracing it brings serenity. Consider that death is not bad to the one who dies when it comes, because you no longer exist to experience it. This was an Epicurean argument. Epicurus was not a Stoic, but had some aligned views on death, which the Stoics found reasonable. As Epicurus put it, where death is, we are not. Meaning when death arrives, you won't be around to be miserable about it. All the fear is in anticipation. Once it happens, either there's an afterlife of some sort, in which case it's a new journey, nothing to fear if you lived well, or there's just peaceful nothingness, in which case nothing to fear either because you won't know. Either scenario doesn't justify terror. Use mortality as motivation to live well. This is crucial. Memento mori isn't about gloom. It's about urgency and prioritization. When you remember, I won't live forever, it clarifies what matters today. Petty worries drop away. Are you going to spend your limited days fretting constantly or doing something meaningful? Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Whenever he slacked or got distracted, he'd pull himself back by recalling he might not have another chance to do good. This doesn't mean panic, it means focus. It encourages kindness. If I or someone I love could die tomorrow, do I really want our last interaction to be an argument over nothing? Courage, if I'm going to die anyway, I shouldn't waste time not doing what I feel called to do out of fear. And appreciation. Every sunrise, every meal becomes more vivid, knowing they're finite. Define your values in light of mortality. Stoics valued virtue, character, above all, because they knew that things like wealth, status, or even health are transient. Death levels all. But a life of integrity and contribution can outlast you in effect, or at least gives your life meaning up to the end. Many found comfort that while death takes your body, it cannot take a well-lived life from you. Your actions are done. Your story is written in the annals of time. This legacy mindset shifts fear into a desire to live in a way that when death comes, you can say, "I used my time well. I have no major regrets." Face smaller deaths to practice. Stoics sometimes spoke of sleep as a brother of death. Each night you die, in a sense, and are reborn waking up. It's a mini rehearsal, and we aren't afraid to sleep. Most of us look forward to it. Also, experiences like moving away from a place or ending a chapter of life are mini endings we survive. They teach us endings are part of life, and often new beginnings follow. This can ease the concept of the final big ending. Witness nature and accept impermanence. When you see a flower bloom and wither, or a pet live out its life, it's poignant but also normal. Stoics spent time observing nature to cultivate acceptance. They'd say, "Look at the stars. Even stars die eventually, yet new ones form. It's how it is." One might wonder, if someone is older or terminally ill, how do Stoics approach the imminent reality of death? There are letters from Seneca where he comforts a friend on the brink of death by saying effectively, "Think of all the adventures of life you've had. Death is just the final act which completes the story. Don't fear it. You've done well, and now it's like a rest after a long journey." Seneca also said life is long enough if you know how to use it. So the emphasis is on quality, not quantity. A short, virtuous life is not tragic to Stoics. A long, wasted life kind of is. This perspective can reduce the panic of, "I need more time." Instead, focus. What can I do with the time I have? Which could be short or long, unknown. It's interesting. Many people report that when they confront mortality, like a near-death experience or serious illness, after the initial fear, they often start living with more courage and joy. They stop sweating the small stuff and follow their heart more. Stoicism tries to get us to that awakened state without needing a brush with death, by mentally and philosophically confronting death regularly. So practically, how to implement Memento Mori. You might keep a reminder, some wear a ring or bracelet with Memento Mori, or have art like an hourglass or skull image, not to be spooky, but as a conversation with yourself. Remember, time is ticking, appreciate and act now. In the morning, acknowledge, "I have woken up, I'm alive, fantastic. There's no guarantee of tomorrow, so let's make today count." In the evening, reflect, "If I were not to wake up, have I expressed my love to those I love? Have I left my affairs in decent order? Did I inch closer to being the person I want to be?" This isn't meant to depress you, but to keep you aligned with your values daily. Discuss mortality with friends or family in a healthy way. It can reduce taboo and fear. Even planning for death, like making a will, or saying what kind of funeral you'd want. Stoics would encourage that as wise and freeing, not morbid. It puts you in some control and acceptance mode. By regularly contemplating death, Stoics found that the fear of it melts away, and what's left is a calmer, bolder approach to life. You realize the worst-case scenario, in worldly terms, death, isn't something to run from every moment, since it's coming whenever it comes regardless. Better to spend that energy living. Also, once you aren't so scared of death, other fears, losses, changes, even pain, diminish too, because many of them are tied into that ultimate fear. It's like pulling fear out by the root. When you no longer fear death much, you become incredibly present and courageous. You won't delay important things. "I'll do it later" doesn't fly when you realize later is not guaranteed. You won't be as easily intimidated. What can someone threaten you with if you've made peace with the worst they could do? And interestingly, you may find greater peace and gratitude. Each day becomes a gift, each moment sweeter. This sets the stage perfectly for our final section, the daily practice of courage, not as an abstract concept, but as everyday choices where you act despite fear. We've covered philosophical grounding. Now let's talk about applying courage in ordinary life situations consistently, which is where true Stoic living happens. 14. Practice courage in daily life. Act despite fear. Courage isn't just for warriors on a battlefield. It's a virtue we can exercise in the small moments of everyday life, and doing so regularly transforms our character. The Stoics regarded courage, or fortitude, as one of the 4 cardinal virtues, along with wisdom, justice, and temperance. They believed that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than that fear. In other words, courage is fear walking, to borrow a phrase from modern author Susan Jeffers, feeling the fear, but doing the right or meaningful thing anyway. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Here, strength can be seen as the inner fortitude or courage we gain when we focus on controlling our mindset and actions. We can't always control what fear arises in us spontaneously, but we can control how we respond to that fear, whether we retreat or proceed. And that choice is where courage is exercised. Seneca observed, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." This reminds us that the pain of fear, imagining what could go wrong, is usually worse than the pain of actually doing the thing. How many times have you dreaded a conversation or task, only to find once you started it, it wasn't so bad, and you felt relief afterward? The suffering was in the anticipation. Courageous action cuts through that imaginary suffering by confronting reality, which is almost always more manageable than our exaggerated fears made it out to be. So how do we practice courage daily? Let's list some everyday acts of courage. Saying no when you need to. It can be scary to refuse a request or invitation, fearing we'll disappoint or anger someone. But if saying yes would overload you or violate your boundaries, it takes courage to politely decline. Stoics value wisdom, knowing your limits, and justice, fairness to self too. So courage here serves those virtues. Next time a commitment you truly can't handle comes up, practice a courageous no with grace. You might fear a negative reaction, but often people respect honesty, and you respect yourself for standing firm. Speaking up when something is wrong or when you hold a minority opinion. In a meeting, if everyone agrees on a plan you think has issues, it's easier to stay silent. Courage is raising your hand and expressing your thoughts respectfully. Or if you witness someone being treated unfairly, courage is stepping in or speaking out, even if your voice shakes. This aligns with justice. You might fear backlash or looking foolish, but doing the right thing matters more. Many Stoics, including Thersiapades and Helvidius Priscus, Stoic senators, bravely spoke against tyrannical acts even when it cost them dearly. They serve as inspiration that some principles outrank personal safety or approval. Starting something new, a hobby, a career shift, learning a skill, in adulthood, where you have to be a beginner and possibly bad at it initially. It's courageous to be willing to fail in public view, to be the novice in the dance class with 2 left feet, or the junior coder who asks basic questions. But this courage leads to growth and often fun. Fear of embarrassment holds so many people back from enriching experiences. Stoic courage says, life is too short to let ego stunt you. Dare to learn and play, even if you stumble. Showing vulnerability. This might sound counterintuitive to courage, but it absolutely is a form of courage. Telling someone you love them first, apologizing for a mistake, admitting I don't know, or I need help. These all require bravery because they expose you to potential hurt or judgment. But they are key to meaningful relationships and personal integrity. The Stoics prize truth and authenticity. It takes courage to be truthful about your feelings or limits. The fear might be rejection or looking weak, but the courageous payoff is genuine connection and self-respect. Enduring discomfort for a purpose. For example, dragging yourself to the gym or for a run on a cold morning to care for your health. That's courage over the inner voice saying, stay cozy in bed, or sticking with a difficult conversation instead of escaping it, because you know resolution lies through it. Every time you resist the easy out, avoiding, procrastinating, numbing, and face the challenge, you flex your courage muscle. Stoics often practice little disciplines like not overeating or taking cool baths to strengthen their willpower and show themselves that discomfort isn't to be feared. Maintaining integrity under pressure. If everyone at work is cutting corners or a friend pressures you to do something against your values, it's courage to stand your ground politely. You might fear alienation, but remember the Stoic principle. Better to respect yourself and perhaps lose a friend or job than to violate your conscience and lose your integrity. Marcus Aurelius had to often remind himself as an emperor not to be corrupted by the luxury and power around him. That took constant moral courage. Facing personal anxieties step by step. If you have social anxiety, for instance, a daily act of courage might be to initiate a short conversation with a colleague or ask a stranger for directions. Tiny bravery adds up. Over time, you prove to yourself, I can do this, and the fear shrinks. Each of these actions by itself might seem minor, but they add up to a character of courage. Courage, like a muscle, strengthens with use. The Stoics understood that you don't wake up one day fearless. You become more fearless by repeated acts of facing fear. Even if it's a small fear each day, doing so regularly expands your comfort zone and your self-trust. It's also important to celebrate your courageous acts. Stoics aren't against feeling good about doing the right thing. It's not vanity to quietly acknowledge, hey, I was scared to do that, but I did it. Good job. That positive reinforcement makes it easier next time. Remember too, courage inspires courage. When you act bravely, others often find their courage through your example, which creates a virtuous cycle. Think of how a single person calmly handling a crisis can steady everyone else. You can be that person in your sphere, not by being fearless per se, but by mastering your fear enough to act with poise. One more thing Marcus Aurelius used to bolster courage was a bit of perspective. If something seems difficult to you, don't assume it's impossible. Remember that human beings have done it, so it is within the capabilities of a human. He'd also say, if others can endure or accomplish something, so can you. You're made of the same stuff. That reminder can be very empowering when fear tells you, I can't. Yes, you can. Maybe not perfectly or easily, but you can take one step and then another. Finally, the Stoics remind us that the ultimate courage is to live a life true to yourself and virtuous, come what may. It's not flashy or dramatic most of the time. It's the quiet heroism of daily choices. It's choosing to hope and try rather than despair, to love rather than to withdraw, to speak truth rather than stay silent in the face of wrong, to carry on after failure rather than give up. This everyday bravery accumulates into a profound strength of character. By practicing these 14 strategies, understanding fear, focusing on control, realigning values, shifting perspective, staying present, visualizing adversity, building resilience, detaching from outcomes, making sense of fears, embracing fate, believing in yourself, ignoring the naysayers, remembering mortality, and choosing courage daily, you are essentially training to be emotionally strong and free. Bit by bit, fear and anxiety lose their dominion over you. They become signals or challenges rather than chains. You transform them into fuel for personal growth. We've journeyed through 14 Stoic strategies, and the common thread is mastery of oneself. Fear and anxiety no longer need to be crippling foes. With these tools, they can become catalysts for becoming a stronger, wiser, more alive human being. Every time you apply one of these principles, whether it's reframing a setback, focusing only on what you can control, reminding yourself this too shall pass and I can handle it, or stepping forward in courage despite a pounding heart, you are taking a step toward emotional freedom. Imagine a life where fear and anxiety don't control your choices. It doesn't mean you'll never feel them. We're all human. Even the Stoics felt twinges of fear. But it means you'll recognize them for what they are, address them with wisdom, and move forward anyway. That's true empowerment. It's not the elimination of fear, but the transformation of fear into an ally. Fear can alert you to what you value, remind you to prepare, or give you a chance to be brave. And you now have Stoic methods to harness those messages rather than run from them. The Stoics believe that each act of emotional mastery is a step toward mastery of life itself. By practicing these strategies consistently, you cultivate an unshakable inner core. The world around can be chaotic. Fortunes change, people come and go, challenges arise. But with a Stoic mindset, you stand like a sturdy oak in a storm. You might sway, you might lose a few leaves, but you remain standing and grow deeper roots through each storm. Over time, things that used to terrify or stress you diminish significantly. You find yourself calmer in crises, kinder in the face of anger, in yourself or others, and more adventurous where you once held back. Anxiety and fear, once transformed, actually become guides. They show you areas to grow. Fear points to where you can build courage or let go of attachment. They highlight what matters. You fear losing what you love, which reminds you to cherish it now. In this way, fear isn't your enemy. Mismanagement of fear is. Now you have the management skills. So as you finish this video, I encourage you, put these strategies to work. Start today with something small. Maybe do a quick negative visualization this evening about something you worry about, and see how prepared and oddly calm you feel after. Or tomorrow when a stressor pops up, practice distinguishing, what part of this can I control, and actively let go of the rest. If you catch yourself worrying about others' opinions, recall Epictetus and chuckle, here I am wanting to improve. Time to be okay looking foolish. Each instance you practice, you'll gain confidence that, hey, I can do this. I'm not a slave to fear anymore. Also, consider exploring more Stoic wisdom. The works of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, and modern commentators are rich with insight. It's a lifelong learning. As you deepen your understanding, these strategies will become second nature. You'll essentially rewire your brain's response to fear and stress to be more Stoic, more cool-headed, purposeful, and resilient. Remember too, you're not alone on this journey. Humans throughout history and around the world experience fear and overcame it using these very principles. You're part of a lineage of courageous souls in the making. When you act with Stoic bravery, you also quietly inspire others. Family, friends, even co-workers might notice your calm or courage and ask, How do you keep so steady? You'll be able to share a tip or two, maybe even spark their interest in Stoicism or personal growth, creating a ripple effect. In closing, let's revisit that initial idea. Fear and anxiety stem largely from within, from our perceptions and judgments. That means we have the power to change them from within. You've now got 14 powerful ways to do so. It won't always be easy, and it won't be instant, but keep at it. With practice, you'll find that where once you saw a terrifying dragon of fear, you now see a windmill to be turned into useful energy. To paraphrase a bit of Cervantes, life will continue to throw challenges, some expected, some not. But armed with Stoic strategies, you'll increasingly greet those challenges with a steady heart and even a hint of a smile. Another chance to practice and grow. That mindset is fearless living. It's not that fear never shows up, it's that when it does, you know how to greet it and guide it out the door while you get on with living. Thank you for watching and spending this time strengthening your mind and spirit. Remember, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Fear and anxiety may knock, but you decide whether to cower or to stand tall and use the Stoic tools at your disposal. I believe in your ability to do the latter, to transform fear into growth step by step. Now go live with less fear and more freedom. As the Stoics would say, fortune favors the brave. You've got this. Good luck on your Stoic journey, and until next time, stay strong and keep practicing these principles. Your future self will thank you.